Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Selamat siang dan kami ucapkan selamat datang kepada para peserta dalam sesi Invited Speakers dalam acara International Conference Disaster Risk Reduction for Disability Inclusion tahun 2022 di Universitas Negeri Surabaya.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the invited speaker session of International Conference of Disaster Risk Reduction for Disability Inclusion 2022.
Pada sesi ini, kita akan dipandu oleh Bapak Riki Setiawan, MED, selaku moderator.
In this session, will be led by our honorable moderator, Mr. Riki Setiawan, SPD, SD, MED.
Bapak Riki Setiawan, MED, merupakan dosen jurusan Pendidikan Guru Sekolah Dasar Fakultas Ilmu Pendidikan Universitas Negeri Surabaya.
Ladies and gentlemen, for your information, Mr. Riki Setiawan, SPD, SD, MPD, is a lecturer from the Primary School Program of Education of Universitas Negeri Surabaya.
Kepada Bapak Riki Setiawan, SPD, SD, MED, dipersilahkan.
Please welcome our honored moderator, Mr. Riki Setiawan, SPD, SD, MED. The time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang Bapak Ibu semuanya. Selamat datang di Universitas Negeri Surabaya. Izinkan saya hari ini, Riki Setiawan, untuk menjadi moderator di acara hari ini. So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Professor Kiran Sihi and all the invited speakers. Allow me to be the moderator in this invited speaker session. This will be my great pleasure for being the moderator in this session. Oke, Bapak Ibu semuanya, untuk acara hari ini kita ada 6 invited speakers yang luar biasa yang nanti akan saya undang untuk naik ke atas panggung. Ada 4 dari 6 invited speakers yang akan menyampaikan atau memaparkan presentasinya secara luring, dan ada 2 invited speakers dari UK dan Netherlands yang akan memaparkan presentasi secara online, secara daring, seperti itu. Dan tiap invited speakers akan diberikan waktu 30 menit, kemudian kita akan melanjutkan ke sesi Q&A, tanya jawab. Dan untuk sesi kali ini kepada peserta tidak ada sesi untuk sesi hari ini tidak ada sesi pada peserta untuk memaparkan materi, namun di sesi Q&A nanti Bapak Ibu dapat memberikan pertanyaan kepada invited speakers, ya, baik itu pertanyaan mengenai materi yang disampaikan oleh invited speakers ataupun tentang research Bapak Ibu sekalian, seperti itu. Dan sertifikat akan diberikan langsung setelah acara ini selesai, maka oleh sebab itu Bapak Ibu diharapkan untuk tetap berada di tempat ini hingga acara ini berakhir. Terima kasih. So ladies and gentlemen, without I'm so sorry for the technical issues. So ladies and gentlemen, without waiting for any further, let's begin our invited speaker session. I would like to introduce to all of you our honorable invited speakers. The first is from Malaysia. It is Madam Salma Joffrey, Director of Special Education Division, Ministry of Education, Malaysia. To Miss Madam, we would like to invite you to the stage. Welcome to the stage. For sure, we will give the best applause to Madam Salma Joffrey. Thank you. The second we have here kepada kita Bapak Eka Prastama dari Komisi Nasional Disabilitas. Kepada Bapak Eka Prastama kami persilakan untuk naik ke atas panggung. Berikutnya, invited speakers kita yang ketiga adalah Ibu Serly Saragi, PhD dari Universitas Indonesia. Kepada Ibu Serly, kita persilakan untuk naik ke atas panggung. Terima kasih Ibu. Berikutnya, kita yang keempat, invited speakers yang keempat ada Ibu Dr. Diana Ramasari, MSI dari Universitas Negeri Surabaya. Kepada Ibu Diana Ramasari, kita persilakan untuk naik ke atas panggung. And we also have two invited speakers who will join us online by the Zoom meetings. The first is Professor Natalia Kusirkova from Open University, United Kingdom, by Zoom meeting. Is Professor Natalia Kusirkova there already? Oh, not yet, okay. Professor Natalia Kusirkova will join us later online by Zoom meeting. And the second is Dr. Saskia van Men, Design Network for Emergency Management from Netherlands, will also join us online by Zoom meeting. So without waiting for any further, we will start our first session with a presentation from Madam Salma Joffrey, and later there will be timekeeper that will notify us if there are 5 minutes left.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, to Madam Salma Joffrey, the time is yours. Thank you very much.
Can I go to the podium?
For sure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good afternoon. Selamat petang, Professor Budi, Professor Kiran, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and also fellow speakers. I'm very happy to be here with you all to share some of the experience with regard to the disaster risk reduction for disabilities, inclusion Malaysia experience. Okay, the focus of my presentation today, we will focus on 7 aspects. That is, the first one is what is special education in Malaysia, and then challenges people with SEND during emergencies. Can I have the slide? Next slide, please. And then disaster risk reduction in the education, emergency and disaster preparedness, and also report on disasters education from 2015 to 2020. And also the next focus is COVID-19 disaster risk reduction, what we are doing for the education sectors. And the last one is the conclusion. Can I have my slide? So these are the focus, as I mentioned earlier. So now, let me tell you, when I heard this morning, when one of the keynote speakers mentioned the numbers of schools in Indonesia is about 500,000 schools, right? In Malaysia, we only have 10,000 schools, 10,000 plus schools only. So in Malaysia, with regard to special, next slide please, special education in Malaysia, okay, we do have, altogether we have about 101,882 pupils of special educational needs in our Ministry of Education. The total numbers of our students with the typical children and the special ed is only 5.2 million, 5.2 million altogether. So out of these 101, they are the special educational need children. And as you can see from the slide, 2016 695 children, they are in our special education school. Meaning to say, all these children, they are in our special education school, 100% student with disabilities. We have 28 secondary, primary schools, and we do have 4 vocational schools and 2 academic schools for the disabled. Okay, but we do have also a special education integrated program in which about 82,834 children, they are in our special education integrated program, and also out of that 60,363 children, they are in our inclusive education program. But altogether, this is the full inclusion. In our country, we do have the SPARA inclusive education program to children who participate in SPARA inclusive education. Ladies and gentlemen, as I would like to go on, the next focus is on the challenges people with SEN face during emergencies. Because of the disasters, as mentioned earlier, disasters could come natural disasters or man-made disasters. So challenges people with SEN face during emergency, there are 5 challenges that we are facing. That is, the people with SEN, normally they do not usually appear on records due to disaggregate database on age, gender and disability. Meaning to say, to identify them during emergency is a bit difficult, right? Because we do not know whether they are disabled or not. And then it is difficult. If, let's say, we do manage to pinpoint them, but it is difficult for them to access humanitarian aid during due to their mobility, because of the mobility limitation. Because of the mobility limitation. For instance, if they are on wheelchair and etc., it is a bit difficult. Or they are visual impairment, it is a bit difficult to help them because due to mobility limitation. And also, the humanitarian assistance do not meet the specific needs of people with SEN. Sometimes the aid does not suit the requirement of our children. And also, next is the evacuation process. To place them to the safer place also become difficult because we need to follow the ability of the children. And then the last one, some of the children with disability, they need a follow-up treatment, etc., the intervention and everything, but during emergency, it is difficult for them to get those things. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, these are the challenges people with SEN face during emergencies, and therefore, we do follow the emergencies and disaster preparedness, especially just like what UNESCO did. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, no, the slide before. I think you have one slide, yeah? No, this one. Oh, yeah, okay, thank you. The next slide, yes. So the disaster risk reduction in education. Now we are focusing on disaster risk reduction in education in Malaysia. The first one, we need to have a very systematic approach. Why is it important for us to have this systematic approach? It is to analyze the disaster risk and reduction measure in education sector development planning. So it is a combination. It is a combination of the action, of the process, and of the attitudes necessary. Because why is it necessary to have this combination of the action, processes, and attitude? It is to minimize the underlying vulnerability of vulnerability factors, such as I mentioned earlier, the vulnerability factors like if they are deaf or if they are blind, if they are physical education. So if they are physical disability, meaning to say that we really need to understand, then we are able to minimize the vulnerability factors. Then why do we need to minimize? It is to improve, because we need to improve the preparedness and beef up the resilience of the education system. And therefore, it enables the uninterrupted development trajectory of the education system so that we can continue access of the people to quality education. So these are the disaster risk reduction in education, meaning to say that we need to have a systematic approach so at the end of the day, they may be able to get quality education even though it is in emergency or in disaster. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as I would like to proceed, So now, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, these are the emergencies and disaster preparedness. Okay, we really follow the UNESCO as listed in the UNESCO. Uh, First, what do we need? What do we mean by school preparedness? So, meaning to say, we need to create a school emergencies and disaster preparedness community. That is what we are doing. And the second one, we need to design a school emergencies and disaster preparedness plan. We need to have the plan. First, we need to have the community. Then after that, we need to have a plan. And after that, we know the responsibility of the different stakeholders. So we need to identify what are the stakeholders, who are the stakeholders, and the responsibilities of every stakeholders. And then after that, then only we conduct emergency drills and exercises. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so we move to the next slide, please. Okay, the next slide. Okay, these are the reports on disasters, and that the focus is on education only. We don't go beyond the education. So in 2015, as you can see, the 2015, we faced the first, I think the first earthquake in which with a 5.2 magnitude in Sabah. It is in Sabah, in which it caused 23 schools damaged. On top of that, we have other buildings damaged, but the focus is on education, so that I mentioned only schools. Though 23 schools damaged, and after that in 2017, we do have fire, schools on fire. And it is a religious school in Kuala Lumpur, and it caused the life of our 24 children. It caused the death of 24 children. And in 2019, we do have a very bad haze throughout the country. So, but it affect the most 5 countries in Malaysia. So it causes to close down 2,600 schools, meaning to say we need to close down 2,600 schools, because you know what? Because we cannot let the children to do any outdoor activities, because it may affect their health. And in 2020, as everyone knows, the outbreak of our COVID-19, therefore 10,159 schools closed. As I mentioned earlier, in Malaysia, we only have 10,159 schools in 2020. Now we have a little more. We have additional about 100 plus, compared to Indonesia, where you have 500,000 schools. Okay, so these are the report on disasters of education sectors. And now, okay, because of the haze, let me tell you, because of the haze, the ministry, we feel that we should have a kind of, we should set up our own SOP. So we really released standard operating procedure for haze after the 2019 event. We do have that. But while doing it, then suddenly the COVID-19 outbreak, you see, the pandemic of COVID-19. Therefore, for that matter, we have to make the early decision. The Malaysia, we need to have early decision of movement control orders, and for us to prevent the virus to spread. So therefore, as I mentioned earlier, in 2020, all schools in Malaysia were closed down. Okay, next, please. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the disaster risk reduction for disability inclusion in the education sector, meaning to say this one, all these three. The first one is, I mentioned earlier, is about the haze and the COVID-19. So in order to ensure during the disasters or during the emergencies or during the pandemic, still the children, they still need to go to get their quality education, right or not? Still they need to get their quality education. So what are we supposed to do with the children? So we need the MOE, we need to introduce 4 strategies. Okay, 4 strategies to be implemented during COVID-19, in which the first one, we need to have flexible classes, schedule and pedagogies. We need to say flexible. flexible classes. Okay, for instance, if let's say you go to school, the schooling hour from 7:30 to 12 to 2 o'clock, right? But due to COVID-19, we may have a flexible classes schedule according to the readiness of the teachers and the students. This is applied to the children with disabilities and also the typical children. And when it comes to the pedagogies, we need to modify the pedagogies because the teachers, they don't see the children, they don't see the teachers. So on that note, we do have the synchronized and asynchronized online classes. Therefore, we do come up with synchronized and unsynchronized classes. How do we go about? The synchronized classes, meaning to say that we do have the real time class, okay? The real time class in which we conduct the education, we conduct the pedagogy, they conduct the teaching and learning process in the classroom, the real time. And there are times, if let's say the teachers or the children cannot come to the real time class, so we do have the asynchronized class, meaning to say the children or the teachers will send materials through any kind of media that's like WhatsApp, Google Meet, whatsoever, to the parents or to the children, and the children will carry out the activities at their own time, the times in which suit them better, okay? Because all these, we need to really emphasize so that the children will get their quality education. So, and then also, on top of that, the Ministry of Education, we do collaborate with TV station, the national TV station. So that's why we do have and together with the Ministry of Education, we do have a program called Educational TV. This TV pendidikan di Malaysia, we do have that. And the children, we do have the teachers will prepare an online, so the children will follow whatever lesson in the TV pendidikan. And also, it is involved children with disability too. We never leave them behind. And on top of that, we do have also digital learning communities. We do have digital learning communities for professional development, because you know what? Remember that when the first outbreak of this COVID-19, everyone is so scared of doing online, right? I think how do we go about? How do we conduct Zoom online? Everyone is so scared, right or not? We might feel that, we are going to do the wrong way of doing it. Is it correct? Yes, I think you agree with me. But now, all of you become the masters of online teaching and learning, right? I think, especially the young one. For my generation, maybe a bit slow, because I'm going to retire in 2 years' time. I already 58 years old. Being old lady is a bit slow when it comes to all these digital things, you know. And also, and on top of that, we do have, as mentioned earlier, if you remember this morning, one of the keynote speaker did mention about the DTEMs, right? The DTEMs, the DTEMs, and we do involve in that too, and we do have master trainers for that. So, meaning to say, because Dr. Hanani, remember this morning, if you see the keynote speakers, because the focus is on SEN. So, the DTEMs that we are doing is for the SEN children. So we do have how to carry out all those teaching and learning. So it involves, really, she is the one who coordinates the project. And now we have about 152 master trainers in our country to train our teachers, our special ed teachers. And we have about 14,000 teachers under special education. I think you have triple, quadruple more than we have, right? But not special ed. Okay. Therefore, as you can see, these are the things we do believe that if, let's say, the children cannot get the education, because now they cannot go to school, right? So the education should go through them. So through what? As I mentioned earlier, through digital, right? Okay. I feel that as if I'm giving lecture, Now today I feel like I'm a teacher. I become a teacher again. Okay, now the third one. That's why the standard one, the launch on online teaching and learning platform network. Now, on top of that, okay, this is the thing. These are the things that we are doing during the pandemic, right? During the pandemic. Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, so now we do come up with a guideline on school operation in new norms. Okay, we do have that. So we do have. Okay, I think because of the time, I think we may go to the next slide. So these are the guideline on schools operation in new norms. We do have guideline. Okay, before they come to school, they went during the school and after the school, what they should be doing. Okay, these are the guideline on management of people with SEND, as I mentioned, before the school open, and then at the school, and also the home-based learning. Okay, next. And we do have the home-based learning, as I mentioned earlier. And this is done by the ministry under one platform. That is the Lima platform. It is a digital learning platform. So all the subjects, they manage, the children, they do have their own password and they can go through this digital learning platform and they then study from there. They get their knowledge from there. Okay, next. And on top of that, do not forget the role of the parents. Normally, when we talk about the education, when we talk about it, we always refer to the school, to the teachers, and to the pupils. But do not forget the role of the parents. So, what we do, what we did, the role of the parent, they are our proxy. They are our proxy, meaning to say, go through them, we teach them how to handle the children with disability in terms of teaching and learning. So, the teachers and the parents, they build a very good coordination, and the teachers teach the parents how to handle the children. Okay, then after that, we do have a support services. In our country, we have 13 special education service centers in which we do have allied educators. We do have audiologists, speech therapists, clinical psychologists as listed there. So these people during the pandemic, what they did, they do have this intervention session online, but not as frequent as when you are face to face, to help the children. And we do come up with, next, please. We do have this, okay, next. We do come up with the activity pack, so that based on this activity pack, those who cannot follow the mainstream curriculum, they will have this activity pack so that the children can carry out their activities at home. Okay, then after that, so these are another activities that we have, another examples. And then next, okay, what we are doing, okay, based on that, ladies and gentlemen, the last part is, as you can see there, these are the disaster risk reduction for disabilities education. Next, because now is a post-pandemic, right? Post-pandemic. So, what are the initiatives? We need to take initiative so if next time it happen again, so we do strengthen our standard operating procedure for influenza too, and then SOP for management and operation of education institute, and also disability inclusive teaching in emergency attempts and advocate modules. Okay, these are the things that we are improving. We like to improve our education system so that our CWD, children with disability, will not be left behind during all these disasters, and though that they still get their education or quality education. So with that, I would like to say thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Salma Joffrey, for the great presentation. For sure, we learn a lot and we get a lot of information from the presentation from Madam Salma Joffrey. And we will go to the next and the second presentation by Mr. Eka Prastama. Kepada Bapak Eka Prastama dari Komisi Nasional Disabilitas, kami persilakan.
Tes, cek. Ya. Iya. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ya, ini jam-jam kritis ya, sudah jam 3, jadi bisa mendengar sambil ngantuk-ngantuk ya. So you can learn with sleepy but we hope not. Ya, bahasanya mungkin campur-campur saja ya, tidak usah full in English karena sebagian besar Indonesia. Jadi karena saya sebagai Komisi Nasional Disabilitas atau National Disability Committee in Indonesia, so I would will focus on ensuring the inclusive and accessible disaster protection strategy for persons with disabilities, a right-based approach of collaboration, support with education sector. So this is the right-based approach in CRPD and law number 8, 2016. This regulation clearly state that disaster protection is a right for people with disabilities. Jadi ini hak dan sudah ada perubahan paradigma, transformation of the paradigm that from charity to right-based approach for all of the ministries, for all of the government, for every person, every society in Indonesia, we must transform into the right-based approach. So this is the one point that disaster protection is one of the right-based. Yeah, the next please. Ya, jadi ini adalah data. Mungkin tadi Pak Praptono sudah menjelaskan banyak data tentang school, ya. Tapi ini saya ambil tadi malam dari BNPB, halaman BNPB Indonesia itu ya setidaknya ada 1,157 floods. Jadi banjir itu ada sebanyak itu. Kemudian 1 Januari sampai Oktober 18 ya ada 184 death. 29 hilang. 29 missing. Kemudian 3.592,471 directly affected and displaced. Kemudian 813 injured. Kemudian ada yang kehilangan rumah dan seterusnya. Jadi disaster, why it is important? Because everyone can be disability because of the disaster. So, jadi kalau kita tidak siap dengan menghadapi disaster ini, maka suatu saat ketika itu terjadi dan tidak siap, maka akan banyak korban, akan ada kemungkinan menjadi disabilitas. Itulah salah satu urgensi dari dampak disaster. Nah, kalau kita lihat next, lanjut saja ya, oke. Jadi di Indonesia ya setidaknya ini salah satu report bahwa Indonesia itu termasuk dalam top of the countries with the highest disaster ya related death toll ya in 2018 with 5,510 casualties. Kemudian itu ya 2004 sampai 2019 ya 219 disaster in which 186 people died with a further 13 million people affected. So this is the disaster risk in our country context. So if we can educate, we can share the information for our school, special schools, and with education, it can reduce or minimize impact of or victim of the disaster. Next. Ya, ini salah satu fakta. In 3 weeks, there are 227 disaster. Within 3 weeks, ya. Last week in Jakarta, I saw the television that 3 students died because of flood in Jakarta, and the wall is broken, and the children, three children died because of that. That is one of example that how important of the communication and education about the disaster risk reduction. And the left side, when I visited Semeru volcano in Lumajang, yeah. From the National Disability Commission, we visit, we monitor and evaluate how people with disabilities are affected or get a victim by this disaster. Next, please. So, this is in a regional context. So, disaster is not in Indonesia. It's not just in Indonesia, but in the regional context. Dan kita tahu bahwa Indonesia baru saja menjadi tuan rumah UNS Cup. We just as apa tuan rumah tahu? Tuan rumah apa? Tuan rumah host ya, host. Ya, host of UNS Cup ya, high level intergovernmental meeting. Ya, this is some data that disaster risk reduction is also one of the main goals from UNS Cup or Incheon strategy. Yeah, Asia Pacific is the most disaster prone region in the world. There are about 6.9 billion people and killed more than 2 million. That is 41,373 lives per year. This is not a small number of people with disabilities who died. Nevertheless, there has been substantial reduce in number of fatality from 2011 to 2020. The average loss of life per year fell to 10,936 lives. Yeah, despite the lower loss of life as years go by, the number of people affected by disasters has fallen only slightly from 139 million people between 1970 and 2010 to 122 million people between 2011 and 2020. Jadi memang pengurangannya tidak ada selisih yang cukup banyak. Jadi ini menjadi salah satu concern kenapa disaster risk reduction menjadi penting di tingkat Asia Pasifik. Next. Ya, ini terkait dengan situasi Indonesia. I just explain or capture the situation of people with disabilities in Indonesia. There are around for children, for example, there are 3.3% prevalence disability adult with disabilities, 22%, and elderly with disabilities 3.8%. So we know that at least 3.3% children with disabilities are have risk for this disaster. And the situation is also about the span of Indonesia. This is based on the research that Indonesia spends significantly less on social programs for people with disabilities than other countries, and approximately 94.5% of people with severe disabilities have no access to Indonesian social protection system. So this is the situation why disaster risk reduction also still challenging. Yeah, next. Yeah, this is the prevalence of types of disabilities uh, up to 10 years old based on SUPAS 2015. Uh, at least there are 672,000 people who cannot do all, and 300 to 29,000 who have a lot of difficulties of sitting, standing, walking, or climbing. About the difficulty of hearing, there are around 1,118,000 for a lot of difficulties on hearing. So this is related with the presentation of our presenter before, like Mr. Kirun and Pak Praptono, also Madam Salma, that how difficult people with disabilities if they cannot do all and there is a disaster. They need support, they need system or how to protect their mobility, for example. They need guides to solve this situation. Jadi memang itulah yang penting. Kalau kita bayangkan yang non disabilitas begitu ada gempa bisa lari. Nah, bagaimana dengan orang-orang dengan disabilitas? Saya punya cerita ketika saya berkunjung di Lumajang. When I visit Lumajang, there are one victim who young with disabilities. The volcano is blast, yeah. He is close to the volcano, yeah. All of people run, but he cannot run, and his mother carry him. All is black, all is apa? Abu apa namanya? Ash ya, ash ya. The mother didn't want to leave his son. Yeah, she said that she want to die with his son, but there are lights, and she knew the road, how to access to the not close to the volcano, and yeah. And the mother, his mother try to menyeret apa mas? Jadi ditarik untuk naik ke tebing gitu ya, iya. Put the children until the foot broken. I get the history. Jadi itulah salah satu faktanya, dan begitu dahsyatnya ketika ada bencana, disabilitas menjadi sesuatu yang ya ditinggalkan begitu saja. Ya yang bisa lari, yang tidak bisa kan mencari selamat sendiri kan gitu. Nah, bagaimana kalau itu tidak ada edukasi yang pas? Ya, next. Ya, disability inclusive disaster risk reduction is a human right issue. Ya, itu tadi sudah saya sampaikan bahwa ini adalah satu ultimate goals about the disaster risk reduction is must be inclusive. Next, yeah, di Indonesia, this is under the law of number 8, 2016, Article 20 clearly state that one is about the easily accessible information. The second is about knowledge about disaster risk reduction. The third is about the priority in the process. So, children with special needs must be a priority in the evacuation of the disaster. And the fourth, easily accessible for rescue and evacuation. And 5, get priority facilities and facilities that are easily accessible at the refuge camps. Jadi itu 4 poin yang penting, dan the explanation in this law, Article 109, ya, ini yang penting. Government and the local government are required to take the necessary steps to ensure handling person with disabilities during disaster. And the second is handling person with disabilities must pay attention to reasonable accommodation. Jadi bagaimana akomodasi yang layak harus diperhatikan, and accessibility for person with disabilities. And the last, person with disabilities can participate in disaster management. Yeah. Next, yeah, this is the government regulation under the law number 8, government regulation number 42 year 2020 about the protection from disaster for person with disabilities. Ya, jadi bisa dilihat bahwa there are six aspects. The first is disaggregated data. Ya, kemudian yang kedua accessibility. Number 3, reasonable accommodation. The 4, participation. 5, about capacity building, and the 6, about protection priority. Jadi ini aspek-aspek yang must be considered if we try to develop material for education or others. We must think about these 6 principle or aspects. Ya. And the period, ya, yang pertama pre-disaster, and the second during emergency response, and the third about post-disaster. So the protection from disaster for person with disabilities in disaster management in pre-disaster include first about early warning system, how they understand and how the system established. Kemudian itu juga harus reach person with disabilities, harus bisa ditangkap oleh mereka. And the second about the facilitate the preparation of preparedness plans. Ya, jadi bagaimana perencanaan in the household level. 2 hal itu yang penting. Kemudian central government and local government carry out target program and activities to promote disaster reduction through. Ada 3 hal dan ini jadi penting. Yang pertama adalah educational services, both formal and informal. So this project, this research, or this effort clearly support the number 1 about educational services. We can do informal like special school, or informal. But if there are children with disabilities, they are part of our beneficiaries. The second, disaster training, simulations, and rehearsals. And the third is other pre-disaster activities. We can innovate what kind of activities. Next.
issues happening here regarding the electricity issues. So now we will go back to our invited speakers, to Mr. Eka. Thank you very much for your patience in waiting. Once again, we are very sorry for the technical issues regarding the electricity. So now we will continue again to our second invited speakers, to Mr. Eka Prastama. Time is yours to continue your presentation. Thank you.
Ya, terima kasih, Mas. So my last presentation about the government regulation concerning disaster risk reduction. That this topic of this conference is really support for the regulation, especially for the period of pre-disaster. How the central government and local government carry out targeted program and activities to promote disaster risk reduction through education services, both formal and informal, and disaster training, simulations, or others. And the three is other pre-disaster activities. So that's the point that we have a strong regulation to implement the right. So the next slide is about the strengths and potential resources. So in Indonesia, there are some reference, some literacy, like Pak Praptono explained before about module 1 until 1, 2 until 3, about the safety school, and also disaster preparedness from not only from the Ministry of Education but also the other ministries and NGO. Next, yeah, this is the before sebelumnya slide-nya, ya, ini adalah salah satu kekuatan atau the main important things, how participation of people with disabilities during all the process of disaster risk reduction on the emergency and PAS. Ya, jadi itu beberapa keterlibatan yang disabilitas di dalam disaster risk reduction. Itu yang paling ujung saya waktu di Lumajang, ya, dengan teman-teman lokal DPO di Lumajang. Next slide. Ya, this is the system are in place and on progress. Ya, jadi kita sudah punya first we have a national and local action plan that must concern about the disability inclusive. Second, establishment of disability service unit for disability inclusive disaster risk reduction in some province and districts. Central Java, Yogyakarta, I don't know, Bali, and some districts in East Java, Central Java, there are already established special unit for disaster reduction. And the fourth, and this is also very important, how to engage DPOs. People with disabilities is very important. They must be part of this process within the system. And the five, we also have a monitoring and evaluation by National Disability Commission and also public. Next. Yeah. explain about action to improve disability inclusive disaster management. There are five action plan, five main action plan. The first, include people with disabilities. Second, help to remove the barriers to the full participation of person with disabilities. Barrier means accessibility, for example, reasonable accommodation. Third, ensuring the new construction rehabilitation. Yang ketiga, 4, 5 ini lebih kepada kondisi post emergency and post emergency. Fourth, about the collect data, disaggregate. 5, about increase awareness among governments and their partners of the safety and security needs of person with disabilities. So this is 5 aspect to action plan. Next, what's the main challenge? First, about the limit of education material. Limit of research, saya kira di Indonesia juga masih sangat sedikit riset terkait disability. Kalau disasternya banyak, tapi disability research about disability, disability inclusive disaster risk reduction. Apalagi untuk anak disabilitas, disabilities sangat sedikit lagi. Yang kedua, lack of understanding, knowledge, and interest from the government, private sector, and also from the ministries. Not all of the ministries have a high concern with this. Yang ketiga, less of knowledge, understanding, and concern from people with disabilities. Kadang juga banyak teman-teman ngapain sih, nggak penting. It's not important to prepare the disaster risk reduction. Tapi ketika ada, itulah yang terjadi, tidak bisa menghindar. Fourth, about the stigma and discrimination, to engage. Buat apa melibatkan disabilitas? It's not important to engage people with disabilities during the training or preparing disaster risk reduction, for example. 5, ensuring involvement and participation of person with disabilities or DPOs during all phase of disability inclusive disaster risk reduction. Ini beberapa yang penting. Kemudian berikutnya next, opportunity, with special education. Saya kira yang pertama, there are expertise, knowledge, and experience of disability, are one of the main strengths for the teachers based on the special education. Second, about close relationship with parents and children with disabilities, so they can do the best approach for parents and the children. Number 3, about network with the government and local organization. This is one point also. Teachers, school have close relationship to the government and the people with disabilities. And the last is about the innovation. Innovation to provide accessible learning material. Saya kira guru-guru pendidikan khusus punya banyak sekali inovasi, dan itu jadi modal, itu jadi opportunity or strength to do an innovation during the education of disaster risk reduction process. Berikutnya, next, ini lebih spesifik, mungkin tidak terlihat. Jadi bagaimana 7 pillars of action and contribution opportunity of the special education. This is I refer to the inclusion moving beyond resilience in the pursuit of transformation Sydney. So there are 7 pillars, and the blue bullet is about the special education opportunity. Jadi misalnya nomor 1 improve data and knowledge. Jadi untuk special education, they can identify any appropriate needs or support available of knowledge, for example. Nomor 2, redress stigma, discrimination. So the special education project can provide education tools, media to promote removing barriers. Itu ada cukup banyak hal, dan saya kira itu yang terpenting juga, misalnya prepare best practices dan open and support any collaboration. Itu misalnya untuk nomor 7. Nah, next, ini saya menggambarkan sedikit explanation about National Disability Commission. So we have monitoring, evaluation, advocacy, and institution or cooperation. So this is one information for you all. How we can do a collaboration in the future. We have a direct report on the president, so we can report this conference results, this data to our report to the president. Next. Ya, ini mungkin yang terakhir, yang penting, what next collaboration opportunity. The first about monitoring implementation, we can do during this project to review the regulation, review the policies related with disability inclusive DRR, and second, improve or strengthen available instrument to do monitoring program. For example, how the Ministry of Education, how the local government do their program for disability inclusive DRR. Second is about the national local advocacy. First, how we can collaborate to provide instrument of education, socialization, and training for stakeholders, include children with disabilities. Second, engage in policy analysis and give input to strengthen system of disability inclusive DRR at both national or local level. And the last about research and development. So we have research approach also to monitor and to evaluate. So we can engage in the National Disability Network or in DRR issue and collaborative research in disability inclusive DRR topics. This is what I can share during this conference. So the main important message is this is rights, and we must ensure this right can be fulfilled by all of our children with disabilities. Thank you very much. Terima kasih banyak. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih banyak Bapak Eka Prastama atas presentasinya yang sangat luar biasa. And now we will go to the next invited speakers. I would like to greet two of our invited speakers from United Kingdom and from Netherlands who already joined us online by Zoom meeting. First is Professor Natalia Kusilkova from Open University, United Kingdom. Hi, Professor Natalia, are you there with us?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Good afternoon, Professor Natalia from Surabaya. So what time is it now in United Kingdom?
You know, I'm actually joining you from Norway, and here it is 11:30.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Natalia, for joining us today. And the second, we have Dr. Saskia van Menen, Design Network for Emergency Management from Netherlands. Hi, Dr. Saskia, are you there with us?
Yes, I am. Hi. Good
Hi.
afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Dr. Saskia. Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. So now we will go to the presentation from Professor Natalia Kusilkova from Open University, United Kingdom. And the next 30 minutes will be yours, Professor. And I will notify you when there are 5 minutes remaining. Thank you very much, and the time is yours.
Many thanks. I'm delighted to be joining you, and I would like to say how humbled I feel to follow up with my presentation after listening to your distinguished speaker, who really reminded us of the key values we need to follow as you are thinking about disaster risk reduction for disability inclusion. And the important points that have been summarized have been so excellent that I will not attempt to be adding to those or to be saying more, because I really felt that the framework that was presented and the big work that went into its production really needs to be recognized. So thank you so much that I can be part of this conversation and add some thoughts about the work that we have been doing here. You should be able to see my slides now. If there is a technical issue or anything, please just let me know. I have been so supported in preparing this presentation by local organizers, so hopefully everything will run well. The issue that I would like to talk to you about today is about digital reading. That is to say, children's use of digital media as an important factor when we think about inclusion and what can happen before a disaster strikes. So there was a lot of talk within the presentation we heard before me about the importance of prevention, and that is the space where I have been conducting my research together with colleagues in England, in Norway, in Malawi, in Japan and Spain. So I'll try to summarize the different lessons that we learned as part of this research, and I hope that there will be something that you might find relevant in your own context. I have been looking at children's use of iPads, tablets, and smartphones in relation to the use of stories. We heard about the importance of active participation, active involvement of parents, active involvement of teachers, and of course children. Children are very important agents of change, and the technical environment that is today offered to young children lends itself to children's active participation in several ways. My focus on stories has been capitalizing on the fact that these digital technologies allow children to express their voices in different ways. So children can make their stories by drawing them, they can express their stories by recording them with a voiceover, they can decide to have some music in their stories when they download something from the internet, or maybe create a song themselves. They can sing, they can dance, they can play an instrument. I know you have some beautiful songs. I was privileged to listen to one that Professor Kiran played for me. So that is also a lovely way of how you can incorporate different modes or different types of engagement into children's stories. My specific focus was on looking at how children can also write their stories, so in text, in different languages, and how the possibility of a story in a digital format allows us for almost automatic translation. So you can have a child's picture, and to the child's picture you can then add text in different languages. And I know that you have many different dialects and types of languages in your country. I speak many different languages myself, and I have found this digital format quite helpful for accommodating the different voices and languages that children can bring to their stories. I would like us to think a little bit about this aspect of digital technologies and screens more broadly, so that we don't jump on the conclusion that if we have digital technologies, we can universally address some of the big challenges that we are experiencing. I am by no means suggesting that giving children the possibility to make a story on a smartphone will solve the very complex issues that we are seeing in terms of facilitating children's active voices. That is not the case. I'm only saying that it is one means for hearing, seeing, and visually representing what children carry inside them with their own stories. When we talk about technology, there are many aspects we need to take into account. I am joining you on Zoom. That is one type of technology. Children are using tablets, they are using smartphones. That is the hardware that children have available or might have available if we decide to invest in this type of technology for them. But a lot of the modern technology comes with algorithms and with data use that are problematic. So we need to reflect on the positives and the negatives before we think that this type of intervention is suitable for the children in our context. I have been doing some work in Malawi where we have seen that the use of mobile phones was highly appreciated by the parents and children when they were making their stories and collecting stories from the community. But there have been issues around social networking, social media, where images and voice recordings have been shared with people who were not supposed to receive them. So we need to always think about what happens when we make a story and where the story in a digital format can then travel. And of course, respecting children's rights and their own authorship of the story is very important in these considerations. There was a mention during this conference about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, as it was experienced in different countries. I was in a lockdown in Norway, so I could analyze the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on Norwegian children. So all I can say is that we noticed the key negative impact of COVID was about this disruption of the relationships that parents and school had. And that is something that I also want to highlight and remind us of, that when we talk about digital technology, we need to remember that it's not equal for all children. So even though they might be using the same device, they will be using it in different ways. And one helpful technique that we have developed with colleagues in research, and that might be helpful when you speak to policymakers and ministries, to sort of simplify and make it easier to understand the complex issues that we have to remember with technology and children, is the so-called C's. So the letter C, like in the vitamin C that we all need to keep healthy, we use the C's when we talk about the complexity of technology use. And what it stands for is the first C for the child. We really need to have the child at the center of these discussions, children's rights and their active participation. Then we need to remember the other C, and that is the content. So the content of their stories. What do they talk about? What are their experiences, their personal experiences? Some children have horrendous stories inside them that they share through the means of the story, and that helps them to process the trauma and very hard experiences they had. So the content of the story will be very different for children in different contexts. And the context is the third C. Context relates to different homes, different schools, different environments where these children grow up and where they're experiencing the issues that we are discussing at the conference today. The communities that shape what is happening for children in these contexts, the communities that is parents, that is teachers, librarians, policymakers, that is us, people attending this conference. We all are part of one community, and we all jointly, through many connections, influence what is happening in relation to the child. So those are the four C's, the fourth one being the connections among all these different elements. And now I would like to tell you a little bit about digital books, very specifically. And I chose this topic to sort of exemplify or illustrate what is possible with digital technologies in a positive way. And you can take this example as a possibility to consider and perhaps evaluate in relation to these different C's, the different 4 C's that I've just presented. So very often when we discuss the value of digital books with parents, communities, ministries, they ask us as researchers, whether it is helpful to use a digital book or whether it's better to use a print book. And we often say that that is the wrong question to ask, that rather than comparing the digital to paper, we should be thinking about what works best in this specific context. And here are some summaries of studies that have been conducted, mostly by colleagues in Europe, USA, Canada, Australia, where the movement towards digitization has been ongoing for several decades, with a lot of push and press from the governments to invest in technologies for individual children. So individual families have received iPads, tablets. They may have bought them themselves, or they may have received them through the school. And that allowed researchers to closely examine what is the impact of these technologies on young children. And a quick summary of those studies would be that there are some positive effects and there are also some negative effects. So on this slide, I'm highlighting the negative aspects of digital books that of course might not be applicable to your country, but it's good to know about them. One is that the quality of the content that children receive on tablets and smartphones, but also computers and iPads or whatever technology you have available, you might find that the content that children find online is not really of high quality. And that is, of course, where experts and teachers step in and develop their own content. And that is where I'm saying that in that process of developing our own content, let us listen to children's voices and let us involve them in the decision making. What content do we include in the stories that are supposed to be for them? We also need to remember that the stories, the digital stories that are being offered to young children and that are commercially produced by some of these big players. I'm mostly thinking here about Google and Apple. They do not necessarily come with good content. When researchers looked at what these digital books are doing to the conversation between parents and children, between children themselves, and between children and teachers, they found that the design interrupted the conversation. It didn't help, it did not make it better. And that is, of course, a very negative impact of technology that we need to avoid. One way of avoiding it is to design digital books by the community members. And when researchers looked at what is then the added value, the benefit of doing so, of creating our own digital books for young children, rather than buying them ready-made from the big commercial providers, we have found some very positive effects. And the reason is that if we make digital books ourselves, if you use your expertise, your knowledge about the children, about the community, you can then be including it into the digital content in a much more meaningful way than what can be achieved by a designer sitting somewhere in California. And you can then be achieving some of these benefits that we are seeing on this slide. So children who have some specific literacy difficulties can be significantly benefiting from digital books that are specifically designed for them. Now remember, I said that this research is very Western based. The studies have been conducted in countries that we call the weird countries. So we need to remember that the research coming from your communities still needs to happen. And I hope that it will lead to some innovation in this space and really inspire other countries in looking at what can be achieved when children are actively involved in this process. When I say actively involving children and community members, I am talking about personalization and inclusion. Those are the two keywords that we use in our work, and that those of you who have a research background or are curious to find out more about, you might want to search for these terms and see whether there is some inspiration for your approach. Personalization and inclusion were the core values that we included when designing books for children and with children. When we designed books that children themselves could make, we developed an application that works on tablets and iPhones and iPads, different types of devices, and that we call our story. It is not my story, but it is our story, the community story. We also developed other products together with children, and those are just the screenshots of the different applications that you can find. But the Our Story application that was developed at the Open University is freely available for use and might be a nice tool to consider if you want to make children's own stories. And remember, as I said at the beginning, that it is important that children can not only have pictures, but also their voices. They can also write text, they can make drawings or short videos. All that is possible with this tool. So it is just a small example of how you can take technology and use it for activating children's voices. I am part of this UNESCO Inclusive Policy Lab, where we often have a discussion about the value of technologies. So if you are interested in how we can combine different international forces in this space, please reach out to me. I would be delighted to have that conversation. And in closing, I want to mention some of the digital libraries or platforms that are available for young children, where they can make their own stories, and they can also mix and match, so combine different images that have been already made by other community members. And it is not just images, there are also some traditional stories that have been collected and that can be used for adapting. I feel that the focus on stories is a very important focus when we are discussing the experiences that children need to process. Psychologically, it's very important to have a story in your mind, a narrative that helps you put the difficult experiences you may have had into a meaningful framework. So a meaningful way to make sense of what has happened. That psychological process is largely facilitated with a story that you make. And these different platforms allow children to do that. Of course, children can and should be doing that with the adults around them, with their caregivers, parents, teachers, other members of the community. But if these are not always available, then this can be a good addition to what is possible and how children can make their stories, share their stories. In a very recent project, we created a library together with Ukrainian children. You would have heard of the Ukrainian refugee crisis that we are experiencing very intensively right now in Norway, with many refugees coming to our country. So as part of that process, we created some books, some digital books for Ukrainian children that help them to process the trauma they experienced during the war. So this is just a little example for the flexibility of technology, the quick way of how we can address some of the very acute, very imminent issues that are happening around us. If we had to print new books and have paper-based books for the influx, for the thousands of refugee children coming to our kindergartens and schools, we wouldn't be able to turn it around so quickly. But doing it digitally allowed us to create a library of digital books that children here in Norway, but also anywhere in the world could be using and could be using to think about different issues, not the very difficult and dark experiences they had. So I think that is what I wanted to share with you today, talk about some of the benefits of digital books as a little example for what can be achieved if we use technology in an effective way, but also to remind us of the possible limitations in this approach, and to really go into this space with understanding that it is a brilliant way of how to activate and how to make sure that children are participating in the process in a meaningful way, but at the same time to remember that we as adults carry the responsibility for ensuring that the process is safe for children and in alignment with their rights. So many thanks for the opportunity to be part of this brilliant conference, and I look forward to following the rest digitally from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Natalia Kusirkova, for the great and fruitful presentation. We believe that we learn a lot from your great presentation. Once again, thank you very much for the fruitful message. Okay, next we go to our fourth invited speakers. We have here Dr. Saskia van Menen, Design Network for Emergency Management from Netherlands. To Dr. Saskia van Menen, the next 30 minutes is yours, and I will notify you when there are 5 minutes remaining. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. Hopefully you can all see this. Yes.
Yes, we have seen the screen clearly. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much to the organizers of the conference for inviting me to speak here today. It is a really honorable opportunity for me, so really thank you very much, and I'm very sorry that I can't be there to join you in person, but I hope to one day be able to meet you in person. So I would like to talk to you today about designing disaster risk reduction education for all children. So I'm not just talking about children with special educational needs or disabilities. I'm really talking about all children. And I stand here today as a co-founder of the Design Network for Emergency Management, but also as a visiting research fellow at the Open University in UK. So this is an interactive presentation. So for those of you in the room or online, if you can go to menti.com and then type in the code 64844914, you will be able to interact throughout this presentation. You'll also be able to put questions in, and maybe we can get to some of those questions later on during the question and answer session. Alternatively, you can take your smartphone and scan the QR code. And I will have the instructions on screen again when it does come time to interact with the presentation. So let's talk about the disaster risk management cycle. And my presentation doesn't want to advance. There we go. So I think we all know that climate change is leading to a lot more hazards, specifically meteorological hazards, and we're seeing a lot more disasters. We also see more people living in places that are affected by disasters. So we're really seeing a big increase in terms of loss of lives, loss of livelihoods, etc. And if we talk about disaster risk reduction, this is really aimed at managing the risks, the existing risks, potential future risks, and any residual risks that we cannot get rid of. And in general, disaster risk reduction is really aimed at strengthening community resilience at that level. So what you see here is disaster risk management cycle. Now there's a little difference between disaster risk reduction and disaster risk management, in that disaster risk management is really at the policy and strategy level, and disaster risk reduction is really thought to be more at the tactical operational level. So even though this is referred to as the disaster risk management cycle, we can also look at it from a disaster risk reduction specifically. And what we can see here is that we have to act before, during, and after a disaster. We're looking at a continuum here, not just an isolated event or an isolated period during which we want to look, because actions that we do before a disaster occurs will have impact during and after a disaster. So if we look at disaster risk itself is the potential loss of lives, livelihoods, assets, etc., that can occur within a specific period of time. And the probability of that is determined by the hazard characteristics, exposure, and vulnerability and capacity. Now, each of these terms, of course, has its own characteristics and can be subdivided much further, but I won't get into that today due to the lack of time. But I am curious to know your opinion. Which factors of the disaster risk can we influence? Is that hazard characteristics, exposure, capacity, vulnerability, or all of these? So if you want to go to menti.com and vote, I would love to see somebody says all of these. Any other votes? Give you a few more seconds. There we go. Exposure and capacity. Okay, so the interesting thing here is that indeed, for some cases, it is indeed all of these. So we can't, for every single hazard, influence the characteristics. We can't, for example, influence a volcano or an earthquake, but some hazards are actually man-made, and those we can influence. So indeed, we can influence all of these factors. But really what I want to focus on today is influencing vulnerability. Oh, excuse me, there we go. Because in one way or another, everything in our world is actually designed. Everything man-made is a consequence of some decision that somebody took, whether that was a deliberate decision or not. And most decisions that we make are not even a considerate act. So everything is designed. So from the cup of coffee that you drank your coffee from, or your tea or your water from this morning, or the chair that you're sitting on, or the desk that is there, and the computer. So all of these things have had conscious decisions made. But it doesn't just apply to these tangible objects. It also applies to architecture, but also to societal systems. For example, our election systems, they are also designed. Regulations are also designed. The law, in a way, has been designed. And it's really understanding that this everything man-made is designed is really important in how we look at disaster risk reduction. So my next question for you is, do natural disasters exist? And you have two choices here. You can choose yes or no. Yes, we see the majority of people saying yes. We have one no, two no's. Okay, so let me explain that one. We often hear the term natural disaster used, but as I said before, everything is designed. So from where our towns are and what we do, and disasters are not natural. They are the intersection of a hazard with something man-made. For example, if we don't build in an area that floods, there's not going to be a disaster. If we don't build on a volcanic slope, we're not going to be affected by the volcanic activity. Thus, we don't think that there's actually such a thing as natural disasters. There are natural hazards, but not natural disasters. So disasters are also always man-made. And that means that they are a consequence of design choices that have been made. But maybe we can then also reverse that and actually undesign disasters by changing the choices that we make to change the course that we're on. And that brings me to design and the role that design can play in disaster risk reduction. So design is very often thought about as something to make things look pretty. And Steve Jobs, who you see here, was the founder of Apple, is one of the most important proponents of the power of design. And he said, design is not what it looks and feels like, design is how it works. And I think that's really interesting because it takes design away from just the object or the fact that it looks nice into how things work and how we actually have to make active choices. Thus, design actually shapes our actions and interactions with the world. And it's a connective discipline. It looks to build solutions. And there are four main concepts or frameworks within design that I think are very relevant to inclusive disaster risk reduction. And these are design thinking, human-centered design, participatory design, and inclusive design. And I'll now go into each of these four to give you a bit more information on those. So this is design thinking. So yes, design is a creative process, it's a creative field, it's a creative area, but designers do use a very systematic process when they're tackling challenges and they're tackling problems. So when they're trying to come up with a solution, what they'll do, and generally, is go through three main phases. These are inspiration, an exploration and reflection phase. This is also referred to as ideation, and an implementation phase. So we'll first start to understand the problem. We will define exactly what it is. Then we will start ideating ideas around what could be potential solutions. So we're never looking at just a single solution. We're always looking at a range of solutions. And then we try and make prototypes of these solutions. So we make mock-ups and we test things in a very basic way. For example, the most basic way that you can make an app and test it is actually by sketching it out on paper. And if people respond to that, you can then start developing that further. And that is that testing phase. So we really, in design, look at testing ideas with the end user. And once you've tested a design and you've decided which one of your prototypes will make it, you can then actually make it into a reality and implement and launch it. Now, I already touched upon this. We work in design, we work in a human-centered way. And the first way that we start becoming user-centered is really at the start of this, this process, at this understanding. Because the first thing we want to understand is, what does the user actually need? And sometimes the user doesn't actually need what the user says they need. So if Henry Ford would have asked people about a century ago what people would have wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And they wouldn't have said a car because they still didn't have the concept of a car. But what you can actually then start going back to is people say they want a faster horse, which actually means they want a faster way to get from A to B. And really important in this human-centered working also is empathy. So it's being able to imagine what another person's feels, what they might be experiencing. It's really about walking in their shoes. And I think this is also where design comes in with a very interesting toolkit of methods to really help to draw that out. So when also traditionally you might be looking at an audience segregated into demographics, so for example, age, level of education, religious background, or whatever. What design really looks for is a psychographic profile. So we're really trying to understand what motivates people or what demotivates people and where do they want to go with their lives. And then in response to that, we of course try and build solutions. Now, the next thing that's really interesting is within design for disaster risk reduction is participatory design. So this originated in Scandinavia during the 1970s. And it really means that the end users, whoever's going to use the product or service that you're building as a designer, will be involved. And actually what we see is that when you involve people in developing disaster preparedness measures, for example, it gives them much more ownership of the solution and of the results. And therefore the result is also much more accepted within a community and actually much more successful. So involving people is really, really important. Now, it is also good to note here that people can be involved in various ways. So this is Arnstein's ladder of participation. And I always think it's a very helpful tool to keep in the back of my mind. Where am I involving people? Am I involving people? Or am I at the bottom of this ladder where we're talking about non-participation, which can even take a negative form into manipulation? Or am I only doing tokenism? Am I only just consulting what people want, but not really listening to what their input is? Or am I really in this top part of the ladder where I'm looking at partnerships and really working together? Or even maybe being only the one that facilitates a process and I'm handing over control, which means that it might be citizen-led design, or participant-led, or in the case of education, it could be child-led. And the other thing that's really important also when we're talking about human-centered and participatory design is to note that some of these topics, when we're talking about disaster risk reduction, can be really sensitive. So for example, if you were to talk to a survivor of a recent flood, this is really a delicate area and you have to be really careful about how you proceed and you have to be aware of that, you might be triggering traumatic experiences within the other person. So be really careful when you are involving people. And I think the last one that I wanted to talk about, which is interesting for disaster risk reduction education, is really what is called inclusive design. But you'll hear a bunch of terms that surround inclusive design, and they include universal design and accessibility or accessible design. Now, the way that I think it's easiest to think about is that accessibility is actually the goal. So the goal is to ensure that products or services that they support each individual user's needs and preferences. So that's what we try and work towards. Now, normal, if you would display a range of human abilities, it will form about a bell curve, as you see here. And generally, when we're looking at designing, we will design something that fits right about in there. And it reaches a big segment of the population, but maybe not everybody. And now I'm actually quite curious for you, because the next slide is a question. Do you know what percentage of the world population has a disability? So please go ahead and vote. I'd be quite interested to see your responses there. Thank you. So actually, it's about 15%. So if you think about that, out of 8 people, about 1 on every 8 will have some sort of disability. So if we're really designing for that middle part of the bell curve, we're probably not reaching them because their abilities will lie outside of the general population's abilities. So then we can introduce universal design. So universal design is the idea that we design products, services, and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for specialized or adaptive design. So what we mean by that is that we try and make one solution to fit many more people along the bell curve. And I think a really nice example of that are these steps. On the left, you see general steps. You can use them if you're okay to walk, and that's about it. On the right, we see steps in Robson Square in Vancouver in Canada. And there you can see that actually wheelchair users have also been given the option to use this ramp to get up there, while it's also a set of steps. So this is a good example of what universal design might look like. And then I mentioned inclusive design. So inclusive design really tries to cover the full range of human diversity with respect to ability, language, culture, gender, age, whatever human difference you want to think about. And you think about inclusive design as rather than looking at one solution that fits many, we're maybe looking at tailored solutions that only fit small slices of this bell curve, but still together they cover all. And then I think it's really important to look at equality and equity. So if we look at the top left diagram here, we see inequality. It's unequal access to opportunities. And these opportunities can be anything. It doesn't even have to be an opportunity. It can be unequal access to education, but even to a school. If you are a wheelchair user and the school is elevated for whatever reason, then you don't have equal access if there are only stairs. And equality is often mentioned, but equality would be giving everybody the same tools, at which point they still can't reach the apple tree. So I'm in the top right diagram now. Equity, on the other hand, is actually custom tools that identify and address inequality. So if we look at equality versus equity, equality really equates to universal design, whereas equity relates to inclusive design. And in the end, there's justice, which is actually fixing the system that's broken that causes these inequalities to be there to start with. So let's look at when we're designing for disaster risk reduction, who are the most vulnerable? And of course, children are the most vulnerable. There's a WHO, so World Health Organization report from about 2011, which shows that children account for 30 to 50% of deaths in disasters. That is huge. Now, of course, children themselves are not a homogeneous group, and there's lots of different differences within there, starting, of course, with age. As children develop, that creates lots of differences, gender, beliefs, income level, cultural background, etc., and of course, disability. And I would argue that actually disability is one of the biggest subgroups within, or disabled children with disabilities are one of the biggest vulnerable subgroups within this. So I think child-centered disaster risk reduction is really of the essence. And child-centered disaster risk reduction is a term that I would like to introduce here because it's a combination of children participating in it and children leading the disaster risk reduction, while also encouraging community to join in this, and acknowledging, of course, the rights of these children and the specific needs, including protection needs that they have within this. Of course, my slides now won't advance for some reason. Okay, so of course, different types of disabilities. You can have vision, hearing, physical, cognitive. These can be communication, learning disabilities, and psychological. And of course, they might be visible or they might not be. So this is also where it can get really, really interesting when we're designing for this sort of different ranges of disabilities. Interesting, research has found that when children are empowered and supported by adults, they can be better prepared to protect themselves and others. So they generate positive change within the community, which is why it is so important to actually empower these children, but do it in a way that, you know, if we put the child really at the center of the work that we're doing, we can't forget about the wider sphere around them. So that includes you as teachers, it also includes parents, and it includes healthcare workers and other members of the community. So we see that this active engagement is really important. And I think one of the things that we need to do as well is to shift our thinking. If children can analyze risk, if they can design their own disaster risk reduction interventions, if they can communicate risk to their parents, to their neighbors, if they can mobilize resources for community resilience, such as constructing social capital, then actually, rather than being very passive victims of disaster, they can be very important agents of change, which is also what we heard from Natalia just now. And also, I think in terms of disability, we need to shift our thinking. Disabled people, as the icon on the left, it's a very traditional icon, shows, very much focused on passive, not able to take part, very much a recipient. Whereas actually, children with disabilities can very much be active participants and contribute something interesting to a conversation. And this is interesting when we juxtapose that with traditional disaster risk reduction and traditional disaster risk reduction education in specific. So generally, it's just about communicating facts and figures rather than about actually understanding what is important to communities that are at risk. For example, I worked in Costa Rica on a volcano there, and the scientists were very much communicating, this is where, you know, it's dangerous, this is where you shouldn't go, this is what you should do if an eruption occurs. But actually the community's main concern was that they only had one evacuation route. And this was really what concerned them. But the scientists and officials were not engaging with this fact. And because the scientists were speaking a different language to what was important to the community, no advances were made in terms of actually reducing the disaster risk, because the community did make a good point that maybe a second evacuation route would actually be very beneficial. And Ilan Kalman said last year at the opening of the UCL, the University College London Warning Research Centre, that warnings are often seen about being about data and technology, but they're very much a social process. And so I have a question for you. Does teaching people about disaster risk reduction lead to more preventative actions? Yes, 100% yes. Ooh, get a no there. And in the interest of time, I'll get to the answer, and the answer is actually no. Lots of studies have found that either disaster risk reduction leads to the intention to prepare, education leads to the intention to prepare, which doesn't actually, the intention to prepare doesn't lead to the actions to actually prepare oneself for a disaster. So this whole idea that scientists have been operating on for a very long period of time, that information actually leads to action, is false. And recent disaster risk reduction education studies have also found this. So when teachers implement disaster risk reduction education, it doesn't actually necessarily lead to learners engaging in disaster risk reduction activities. And this is a very important and interesting finding. It means that the traditional model where we send information is not as effective as we would like it to be. So how can we change that? And there's actually a second problem with traditional disaster risk education. If you look at it, we provide information before a disaster happens. But when an emergency happens, do you still recall that information? And actually, in an emergency, what's really interesting is that your brain will go through a set of motions. And first, you'll probably have heard of this sequence, the fight or flight, it's often called. But first you tend to freeze, you stop, you look, you assess the situation. And even within that freeze phase, there's denial, there's deliberate, and then you decide what to do. This all takes time. And it means some other cognitive phenomena start occurring, such as tunnel vision. And so you recalling that emergency or that information that you were given before an emergency actually becomes a really complicated task at this point in time. Excuse me. So what we can see from this is that if I start designing, and I design with a couple of criteria, that there's a few that are really important. And I think those are child-centered disaster risk reduction. We want to see children with disabilities as active participant. We want active engagement of the wider community. We're looking for inclusive design, so not a one-size-fits-all solution. And we're looking at contextualizing and including teacher training. And of course, I think it would also be really interesting, and I didn't add it to this list, but to look at what can we do if we provide information before a disaster to make sure that that information is recalled at the time of a disaster, to really provide these cognitive supports that people and students, and particularly students with disabilities, need. And my question to you is, do you think I forgot anything? Is there anything else that you think might be particularly important that I should be adding here? And if you can't think of it right now, don't worry. You can also always put it in the comments or the questions. And I'll show my email address at the end of this presentation. So if you have some thoughts, please contribute them there. Next, in the last few minutes of my presentation, I'd quickly like to pick your brain. So I'm going to show you 3 different options that I've thought about that we could actually take ahead and look at developing for inclusive disaster risk reduction education. And the first would be role reversed mapping. So rather than taking a very passive approach and learning about hazards, some researchers in Japan have successfully gone out into the community and let the students draw the map. And you can see an example of that map here. And by bringing in some other people within this, they are really, they go on a structured, facilitated sort of scavenger hunt to make this disaster risk reduction map and also identify how they might be able to evacuate, etc. And I think this could be one really interesting concept to actually roll out as something that can be used in the classroom and can be made inclusive. Because obviously right now, going out into the community, making a map is a little bit limited. We're really looking at sort of the universal design spectrum here. And, what I think developing it to an inclusive level would be really interesting. Now, the second is role play scenarios. So what these would look like is you would have a scenario, and of course, as a teacher, you would have a full facilitator's guide with that. And you would actually, as though it's kind of a drill, you would run through the simulation. But within the simulation, rather than all students being students, some of them might take the role of a scientist or a government official. And you can swap this out. So it is like a drill, but with a little bit of add-on. And I think making something like that inclusive could be really interesting. Also because drills, traditionally, we know them very well. COVID period, most of us didn't fly for 1-2 years. And if we'd flown before, we could probably still recall the safety briefing. You put on your own oxygen mask before assisting others. You can find the instruction, or you can find lighted ways to the exits. And so we know that these drills really work for people to help recall information in an emergency. But of course, drills are not particularly fun. And this concept would really look at making these drills fun. Now, the third thing that I think could be really interesting is looking at the physical environment. And this is really at looking what kind of signs can we pair with the disaster risk reduction education that's already in place to actually support the recall of the information at the time of an emergency. And how do we make sure that these signs that we put in place, whether these are physical signs or adaptations to buildings, or I don't know yet what it would look like, but how do we make sure that these are understood by everybody? And so now I would like you on the next slide to vote on which of these, as an educator, you would think would be the most interesting to you to try in the classroom. You see a vote for role reverse mapping. Any more votes? Thank you. I will take this feedback on board and I will start, seeing there's you're a small group right now voting, but I see a definite preference for the role play scenarios. And I think my next step will then be to start investigating that more. And maybe I can even make a combination with the role reverse mapping. I don't think they necessarily need to be separate, as well as combining it with sort of the third option. So, my last slide. Do you have any other ideas? If you do about, think activities that could be really useful for students, feel free to pop them in the chat here. Or you can always email me, that is also fine. My email is on the screen here, saskia@dnem.org is the best way to reach me. And for now, I would like to thank you for your attention and your interaction. And I hope you enjoyed that. And I look forward to listening to the rest of the presentations and joining you again at the question and answering session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saskia Van Menen, for the fruitful knowledge through your presentation. We do believe that all the participants here learn a lot from the presentation. Once again, thank you very much. Now we go to our fifth invited speakers. We have here Ibu Shirley Saragi, PhD from Universitas Indonesia. Kepada Ibu Shirley, waktu dipersilakan.
Halo, selamat sore Bapak Ibu sekalian. Ya, saya yakin sudah lelah, sudah banyak sekali yang kita lewati hari ini, kita sudah belajar banyak. Jadi sebelum memulai presentasi, saya mau minta tolong sama Mas Operator, saya berubah rencana, saya akan tampilkan videonya dulu. Saya akan tampilkan videonya dulu, boleh ya Mas ya? Nanti baru masuk ke PPT, silahkan Mas.
Bumi bergetar, lantai pun bergoyang, lampu di atap berair, air di gelas meriam, itu pertanda rempah segera siap-siap, tidak keluar rumah, tenanglah, cari tempat aman, tunggu sejenak, setelah gempa reda, kembali ke rumah. Perhatikan retakan di dinding dan kaca, belajar dan bermain setelah tenang, siaga gempa. Kalau ada gempa, hidupi tempat lain. Kalau ada gempa, masuk ke kolong meja. Kalau ada gempa, jauhi kaca-kaca. Kalau ada gempa, bumi bergetar, lantai pun bergoyang, lampu di atap berair, air di gelas meriam, itu pertanda rempah segera siap-siaga, tidak keluar rumah, tetap tenang, cari tempat aman, tunggu sejenak, setelah gempa reda, kembali ke rumah. Susulan gempa, perhatikan retakan di dinding dan kaca, belajar dan bermain setelah tenang, siaga gempa, siaga gempa, siaga gempa, siaga gempa.
Terima kasih Mas, boleh balik ke PPT-nya. Enak nggak tadi lagunya ibu-ibu, bapak-bapak? Yeah, I do hope that the song kind of lift our spirit, even though the song is about disaster preparedness, especially for the earthquake. So that's what I want to share with you this afternoon. So first of all, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Shirley Saragi Turnip. I would like to call that I'm an educator as well as a clinical psychologist. I work at the University of Indonesia at the Faculty of Psychology, and this presentation that I'm presenting to you is actually not my own. There's a group of people working for this, and then some of them are my musician colleague. So trust me, I cannot sing, I cannot play any instrument. I only enjoy good song and nice, a movement, especially for some educational purpose. And today, I am also going to say thank you to Professor Kiran Sihi, because he was the one who initiated a movement that is called ASIK. Can you see it on the screen? ASIK, ASSIK. It's like our word asik gitu ya. But it's actually a movement that will bring up the equality in the disaster risk reduction program for all children in Indonesia. And that is also a challenge that we are going to face together. I think like the song and the movement that you have seen, we want to, how can we make it more inclusive? Like, I know that it is engaging for children. I know they are having fun learning about it and they learn something important from it, but is it really accessible for every children with disability especially? Okay, next slide please. Okay, next slide. Okay, I will just give you a very quickly overview of everything, because I know that we all are very, filled in our head with all new information by now. So disaster preparedness, basically in Indonesia, we all know it is sporadic, it is not very inclusive, and then it comes with somewhat, I would like to say, boring way, like boring methodology, like teach them, and then the only fun that the student have if they have a drill at school, like if they have a pura-pura ada gempa, and then everybody gets so excited, and then, oh, I will be the one who tell the smaller children, I will be the one who carry the friend who got hurt and everything. Other than that, children usually don't have fun with disaster risk reduction program. And that's what our aim is in writing up this paper. Next. So here are some literature review about younger children and disaster. And then we know that younger children are not little adults. So we have different brain, we have a different way of thinking. And so they are in what we call pre-operational stage. And I know all of us here are educators, we are familiar with all of this term. And then we also need to, specially design the appropriate and good methods in delivering the disaster risk reduction for younger children, because they are too an important stakeholder in our DRR activities. Lanjut, Mas. Okay, so music, younger children and music. How many of you here, expose your children or younger children to music? I do. Some even like to, make sure that their babies in the tummy listen to music, right? Because we believe that exposure to music will increase the intelligence of children. So they like music. Children love music. They like the element of rhythm, melody, harmony, timbre, dynamic, and form. And all of this can be also purposeful. So that's what we want to achieve here. And also, children tend to remember information presented with music. So if you notice that there are many young children in Indonesia familiar and can sing adult songs about love, about heartbroken, which is like, okay, why do these 5-year-old kids sing about this heartbreaking song and things? That's because it's very easy for them to remember if we introduce the content with music. So I think we should use this to our benefit, as we know that children learn better through music and movements. Next. So these are our target group. We want to target children age 4 to 10 years old. And then we want to explore a fun, easy, and engaging methods. And not to forget the participating methods through song and dance movement. And then what we did was we conducted a workshop to create the song. So the song that you just heard, Siaga Gempa, was created by our workshop participants in Aceh. So it is, the copyrights belong to them, not to any famous songwriter. Next. So we had, during the workshop, invited 16 teachers, and then I do hope that one day I can share with you how to do this songwriting workshop, especially when we aim to also write a song or create a song for children with disability with all of you who are presented here. And then the technique is actually very easy. And then what we did, we managed to create it, I'm not sure how many, but I think more than 5 songs about disaster. And what kind of disaster that they want to educate to their children, it is, this is not necessarily fully child participatory, but this is like teachers participatory. We ask the teachers what do they think of the possible disaster in Aceh, and they say that we have tsunami, of course, they have a landslide, they have a flood, they have gempa bumi or earthquake, and then another one is the volcano thing. So then they managed to, I think, create it, or they wrote 5 songs at the end of the 2 days workshop. So that was like quite an achievement, I think. Lanjut, Mas? So, yeah, so here are like some of the situation of the workshop. We just sit on the floor with the carpet, and then you don't really need a lot actually. The musical instrument that we use is only a guitar, but you need someone who is really good with the guitar, and that's not me. So Mas Ribut Cahyono, he was really good with that. Next. So the song that we just heard, these are the words. You can see it here. Maybe the sound was not very clear before. Susah, saya juga sudah jadi. So, bumi bergetar, lantai pun bergoyang, lampu di atap berayun, because most of the people in Aceh, they do not have the lights like this. They have one with like a thread. So it's like moving. Yeah, the Negeri type. So that's the kind of lamp that they have. Itu pertanda gempa, segera siap siaga, sigap keluar rumah, tetap tenang, cari tempat aman. Most people will say run outside of the house, but then we say you must not run. But you have to be very like, how do you call it? Like very standby and very alert to go as quickly as you can, but do not run. So, and then after that, we say to them, tunggu sejenak, setelah gempa reda, kembali ke rumah, waspada susulan gempa. Perhatikan retakan di dinding dan kaca, belajar dan bermain setelah tenang, yuk siaga gempa. Because then as our resources say this morning, that it is very important to, go back to normality. So go back to their activity, play and study, but then they have to keep their alertness for the earthquake. Lanjut, Mas? Yeah. So all of the songs that were created in the workshop were recorded, and then after that, what we did was we went to some communities. Some of them are in Aceh, some of them are in Ambon, some of them are in Java, and we like to get some feedback for the songs. So that's what we did after recording the song. Next. Yeah, I'm just gonna lanjut aja, Mas. These are some pictures of the situation. So we play the song and then we teach the children about the song. I would like also for you to go to our Spotify if you like to learn more and memorize the song, because you can hear the melody there. Next. Yeah, so these are what are the comments that we have. So apparently, teachers and parents loved it. They like it. They say it's easy to remember. And then in some area, they change the accent or the language. I don't know about here in Surabaya, Maybe you can change some of the words as well to be more adaptable for local context. And then the melody and the rhythm, simple, good, cheerful. Because then even though it is about earthquake, even though it is about something terrible, the cheerful melody, rhythm is helpful. It really attracts the children's attention and the parents' willingness to be involved in the dissemination program. Next. And the dance and movement. Actually, we didn't make the dance movement during the workshop. It came a bit later with the children whose video you saw. So those children created the movement. So if you see that they are moving a little bit like crazy, it's because they love it. Like, just, okay, earthquake, so we just go crazy. But then it's fun for them. And then in some area also we welcome if the children or other stakeholders would like to change the movement if they think that some of the movements are too provocative. And then other thing that we study from the dissemination program is that we need to disseminate this. We need a platform to teach the song and dance. And then it's actually very much helpful that it is a simple song, short song, but filled with educational message for a very specific information. So if we give them something too abstract like disaster, when disaster strike, you have to be ready, then it becomes too difficult for them because it's not concrete enough. So it should be concrete, but it should only relate to one disaster event. Otherwise, the children get confused. Is this about the flood, or is this about the volcano, or is it about the movement of the land, such as earthquakes? So that's the message that we get from the evaluation with teachers and parents. And next. Okay, and for the children, they like it. They like it. It's fun and easy. They said the dance was energetic. In some of the songs, they even add up some more energetic movement. And then they said that they are willing to teach the song and the movement to their friends. Even like friends at school, or maybe friends at near the houses. Sunday school friends, friends from pengajian. So they say that I can give something new for my friends. So that makes them very proud. And then in some schools, our partners in Jakarta, we actually practice this like for 1 or 2 weeks every morning, so that the children remember the song very well. So, and they don't mind doing it, because then it seems like a little gymnastic activity in the morning before the class, they say. Okay. Next. Okay, so I think in conclusion, the song and dance are effective and superior media to deliver disaster preparedness messages to younger children. And further improvement to the existing songs and dances are considered very important. And then also expansion of other themes, because then maybe for the children with disability, there might be some other thing that can be considered as dangerous, or something that we need to teach them how to avoid or how to protect themselves. And then also a platform to introduce the songs and dances will increase the effectiveness of the messages. Last slide. So future collaboration. Being here with you guys who are very much interested in inclusive education, which I think really important, really reminds me that we need to make a program that is more inclusive and accessible for all children. So I think in the future, translating the song into sign language is really important. Thinking about how to show the movement for children with low vision or blindness is really important. So I think we need to have some more adaptation. And then the last thing that I think we need to consider about is to combine with other methods to delivering fun disaster risk reduction program. So
the song, the movement, with the books, with the games, with everything else. So again, collaboration I think is the key for our success here. And I guess this is something very, very feasible for us to do since we all come from different background and from different places. So I do hope that this is not the first and the last meeting that we have here, right, Pak Budi? So that in the future, I hope that we can actually combine the effort and make a greater force to achieve our, our aim in delivering a fun, participatory, engaging program of DRR for all children. There is no exception for the accessibility. So thank you very much for your attention. Should you have any further comments, please feel free to send me an email. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Serli Saragi Turnip dari Universitas Indonesia for the knowledge sharing. And we do believe that we learn a lot from your presentation today. Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, we will go to our last invited speakers. I hope that all of you are still enthusiastic in joining this session, and I would like to introduce to all of you our last invited speakers, Ibu Diana Ramasari from Universitas Negeri Surabaya. Kepada Ibu Diana Ramasari, waktu dipersilakan. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Mr. Rizky. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Be my honor that directly live I can meet with Prof. Kiron. Be my pleasure, Prof. Okay. What I wanted to present best practice from UNESA through Satuan Mitigasi Krisis Center UNESA, Crisis Center. In last 2 years, we have concern in disaster mitigation. Even we're not concerned specifically in disability, but next year, inshallah, gonna to be our concern to make a program module, and we want to make software to help disability in disaster. Okay, this is my best practice, Crisis Centers, SMCC best practice. As explained by Mr. Eka, that Indonesia is high risk disaster because our geography condition. Yeah, next maybe. This is our team, my team, SMCC, 9 young people. This is my team. Okay. SMCC have 5 division mitigation COVID, mitigation disaster, management risk, K3 kalau dalam bahasa Indonesia, and division of mental health. Next. Okay, this is why UNESA make a crisis center, especially in disaster concern mitigation, because Indonesian geography has explained with Mr. Eka. Next. Okay, this is in each area, what is it? In risiko in a kind of disaster. Yeah, disaster is about natural, non-natural, and social disaster. Next. This, what is it? Mapping of risiko in disaster in Indonesia. Next. Okay, next. Okay, disaster in next. Okay, this is Mr. Eka has explained. If we talk about disaster mitigation, it pre, in disaster, and post disaster. Okay, next. In disaster about social disaster, we held a webinar against sexual harassment 2021. Okay, this is education our student about sexual harassment to prevent that 2021. Next. About COVID, we held a vaccination. We organized civitas that indicate to be a COVID. I'm organized to looking for hospital, karantina, isolate, especially in 2021. It's so difficult to looking for hospital because of height. Okay, next. Okay, this vaccination. Alhamdulillah, Civitas Academica UNESA dosis 4 apart. Next, this is plasma convalescent education with tracing juga 3T gitu ya, melakukan 3T juga, swab. Next, this is 2000 until now, Jumat Berkah, donate to Gojek, orang-orang yang tidak beruntung. Next, then natural disaster. Okay, next, Mamuju, we in there, we send a team to Mamuju, gempa Mamuju. Next, okay, next Mamuju. Kemudian in floods in Bojonegoro, Lumajang, and then we are activity pre-disaster, Destana dan segala macam. Jadi pelatihan meaningful, pelatihan untuk penanganan cedera, begitu ya. Next. Nah, oke, next. Mitigasi Desa Pandu, sign of penunjuk arah untuk penyelamatan diri, begitu ya. Jadi titik-titik kami mengedukasi masyarakat di sana, how if floods come, they can be safe their own self. Next, okay, this is all our activity. Next, psikoedukasi, mitigasi di Desa Rangka Kidul, pembuatan pemetaan rawan bencana. Next. Okay, next. Ini bagian dari beberapa aktivitas kami, SMCC. Next. Nah, okay, next. Kami juga mengembangkan modul mitigasi bencana, and then we made a comic, for kids to educate about mitigation. Okay, next. Mitigasi Lumajang. Flood, it was, okay. Next, Probolinggo, next, in 2000, mitigasi education, how to mitigation pre-tsunami, pre-mitigation before tsunami. Okay, next. Training of first aid for injury, we held that too. Next, okay. This is kami juga melakukan reboisasi in Desa Sempu, Kediri, Jawa Timur. Okay, next. With Rumah Sakit Kesatria Erlangga to Masalimbo, Island of Madura. Okay, next. This is our activity. And then next, eruption of Semeru. We send a team there. Planting mangrove in Pantai Bohai, Probolinggo. Next, with our rector, in the Lawang, longsor. Okay, next, our floods in Madura, Pamekasan. Next. Trauma healing, psychological first aid. Next, this is badai in UNESA, so we make some activation to clean up the campus lab Merdeka Belajar. Because our activity, Kemensos invite us to present in Panggung Resiliency, all our activity in Bali, May 2022. Mr. Jokowi come, it was. Okay, next. This is our activity in 2022 maybe, I forget. Education in preschool, how to prevent disaster, especially in flood. This is last month. Last month we invite by government of Jakarta to present our activity. Okay, next. This is the last our activity. We come to this mitigation in tragedy of football, Kanjuruhan Malang, psychological first aid, treatment, massage in physical injury. That's all. What best practice MCC. So I just want to share about our activity because the theoretical concept and another have done by another speaker. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore.
Thank you very much, Ibu Diana Ramasari, for sharing the best practices on disaster risk reduction. Next, we'll go to the 15 minutes session of Q&A. So, ladies and gentlemen, you may ask any questions to our 6 invited speakers regarding their presentation or regarding your own research. And we will have these 15 minutes of the Q&A session. Bapak Ibu, berikutnya kita akan memasuki sesi tanya jawab selama 15 menit. Bapak Ibu dapat mengajukan pertanyaan kepada 6 invited speakers kita, baik itu mengenai presentasi dari invited speakers kita maupun tentang topik atau tema dari research Bapak Ibu. Dan Bapak Ibu mungkin dapat bertanya kepada Madam Salma Jopri dari Malaysia ataupun mungkin kepada Profesor Natalia dan Ibu Saskia yang dari UK dan Netherlands, seperti itu.
Thank you very much. My name is Nur Aziza from University of Yogyakarta. When we talk about disaster, we sometimes forget about the cultural or maybe religious belief. For example, in COVID, we're talking about, I think there is maybe a lot of Indonesian doesn't believe of COVID. Or, it's just like, we don't need mass or anything because we believe that death is a God. Yes. Yeah. So, what do you think about that? And it is the same in Malaysia or Netherlands or as a Norway or even in UK. Thank you.
Terima kasih Ibu Nur Aziza atas pertanyaannya yang luar biasa. Tadi pagi kita sempat berjumpa ya Bu Nur Aziza di FIBA dan hari ini kita berjumpa kembali. Pertanyaan dari Bu Nur Aziza ya mungkin akan dijawab pertama oleh Madam Salma Jofri dari Malaysia. To Madam, well.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. I think it is very good. It is very good. It is a very spiritual question, I think. Okay, for all we believe everything happens for reasons, right? And as you can see, we feel that it is a blessing. Having this COVID-19, it is a blessing. Maybe some of them might feel, what do you mean by blessing? Okay, for instance, okay, previously, everyone, we are not sure whether we can carry out the online teaching and learning successfully, right? But due to this pandemic, we have no choice. The children cannot go to school, right? And the children cannot go to school. And nobody can go out from the house. We have the movement control orders, right? So Therefore, we have to think creatively on how to ensure that the children, no matter whether they are the typical children or the children with disability, must get their quality education. So, in a way of saying, it is not a punishment from God. No, it is not that. But maybe God would like to remind us to do more for the children. That is how I feel. And for your information, for special education in Malaysia, I always feel that it is a blessing. You know why? Because of the COVID-19 in Malaysia, the government of Malaysia, we have special fund. Special fund, we call it COVID-19 funding. And this COVID-19 funding, now we have we have at the stage of post-pandemic, right? So this COVID-19 fund, the government, they allocate some of the fund to upgrade the infrastructures of the infrastructures like classes or the OKU friendly building for special educational need children. So in my case, I always feel that it is blessing in disguise. Thank you so much for that. Anyone? I think I covered all. We agreed on the same thing. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Madam Salma Jopri, for the answers. Is there any additional answer maybe from Professor Natalia Kusikova and Dr. Saskia Van Menen? Okay, I think.
Yeah, I think it was a very good question about religion and the fact that some people might not think that COVID exists. And I think in that case, we really have to respect that worldview and start from where these people are thinking. And then we can start to enter a dialogue. Let's not go into an attack mode to show that maybe that they're wrong, because then you will really create conflict and they're less likely to listen. But if you listen to why they think certain things, you can then pick up on certain ideas that you might be able to hook onto to then generate strategies to still get them around to your point of view, which is, of course, that COVID is real, and then it still is a big problem globally.
Okay, thank you very much for the additional answers. Okay, thank you very much too for the questions from Bu Nur Aziza. Okay, do we have the second questions here? Okay, we have one from Bapak over there.
Terima kasih. Nama saya Ngadirin dari PMPK. Pertanyaan saya kepada Ibu dari Universitas Indonesia terkait dengan sing and dance. Sangat menarik buat saya karena mengajarkan atau melatihkan mitigasi bencana atau mengurangi risiko bencana dengan nyanyian dan dance. Peran saya berdasarkan pengalaman atau pengamatan, ini anak-anak itu lebih senang ke nyanyiannya atau lebih senang ke actionnya. Karena pada saat di charter pasti action yang lebih penting. Jadi dari pengamatan yang Ibu lakukan itu ke arah mana? Apa nyanyiannya saja dan dansanya atau ke actionnya juga? Apakah juga di dalam pelaksanaan pelatihan itu juga ada semacam simulasi untuk bencananya? Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak atas pertanyaannya. Mungkin memang betul Pak, mereka lebih senengnya karena nyanyinya itu ada gerakannya, jadi memang gerakannya. Tetapi gerakannya kalau yang tadi diajarkan dan mereka buat itu, gerakannya itu sesuai dengan kata-katanya. Mungkin kalau nyanyi, mereka kan suaranya juga beda-beda ya Pak. Ada anak yang emang nggak bisa nyanyi kayak saya tuh kan nanti nadanya kemana-mana gitu ya, jadi kayak susah gitu. Tapi kalau mereka tahu kata-katanya, itu mereka tetap dapatkan Pak edukasinya bahwa how to notify that if there is an earthquake, waktu kami kasih 1 kali pernah beneran ada earthquake. Jadi so while in the middle of dissemination there's an earthquake and everybody was just like silence and then everybody look at the bottle, the water bottle and they're like it's earthquake. Jadi mereka cepat Pak nangkepnya gitu. Tapi benar kalau dikasih kesempatan bergaya ya anak-anak kan gak suka ya Pak duduk diem gitu. Suruh gerak mereka gerak kayak orang gila aja gitu. Jadi saya sih ya nggak apa-apa lah yang penting edukasinya dapat itu sih. I think the essence is just to make sure that the message is delivered sound and clear to them. So thank you very much ya.
Saya boleh izin menambahkan Bapak bahwa dengan itu sebenarnya SMCC juga sudah menggunakan. Oke. Seperti ini. Kalau ada gempa, nah itu mungkin lagu yang sudah umum ya. Kalau dari Mbak Sherly ini kan beliau create baru. Tapi itu memang kami demonstrasikan dengan gerakan dan itu memang lebih nangkep ke anak-anak. Seperti itu.
Okay, thank you very much Ibu Sherly dan Ibu Diana for the answers. And perhaps we can open one more question, the last question, one more last question. So welcome. Okay, if there is no more any questions, then we will go to the closing statements from Professor Kieran Sihi from Open University, United Kingdom. So to Professor Kieran Sihi, we welcome you on the stage. Thank you.
Terima kasih banyak semuanya yang Thank you. Terima kasih banyak semuanya yang hadir hari ini di sini. Saya sangat senang melihat Anda di sini hari ini. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased that we have this conference. The idea for this began many years ago. I met Prof. Budianto in Japan, and we were working together, I don't know if you remember, in a room, and the room shook, and the whole building moved, and then it was quiet again. Then we went to a school in northern Japan, where the whole of the environment had been radioactive, and many children and parents had passed away. Then, more recently, do you remember we were in Sulawesi, working up in Sulawesi? I went back to the UK, and then huge landslide took away much of the place that we'd been there. So, for me, to work with Prof. Budianto and all my colleagues and teman-teman here today is personally very important. So thank you. I'd like to thank all the speakers who've given their time and all the attendees who've come along. I know it's not always been easy to make these trips, but thank you so much for coming. I hope what we've done today is interesting, and I hope that we will have productive action for teachers in schools and to support the good work of our colleagues here. And I hope we will have that within the next year. So I think we are in a good position to move forward now. We have heard from some great people today, and I'd just like to thank everyone again for coming. It's much appreciated. Terima kasih banyak teman-teman.
Thank you very much, Professor Kieran Sihi, for your closing statements, and we are very happy here that you speak Indonesian very fluently. Once more, thank you very much for welcoming from UK to Indonesia. It's a very long trip. Thank you very much. Okay. Ya, Bapak Ibu, ladies and gentlemen, after the closing statements from Professor Kieran Sihi, I could say that we almost reached the end of our invited speaker session. After this, I will try to make a conclusion of our session. I will try my best to conclude that our International Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction for Disability Inclusion, and after the presentation from our 6 invited speakers, we do understand and we do aware that it is very important to strengthen the accessibility on disaster risk reduction for especially for disability inclusion. So I would like also to maybe mention some of my own experience perhaps. So I stayed for 5 years in Taiwan. Taiwan is a very small island and it's famous on the earthquake for sure. So I studied my postgraduate in the east of Taiwan, is in Hualien, and earthquake there is very common. It's very common. We can have earthquake every day. So what the governments do, especially the university do to us, international students, to all students, regardless the disability or the normal, the other students. So first for sure, stay calm, and action is very important. So try to hide under the table, perhaps, something like that. And we also get some insight from our invited speakers here that for sure we need to handle some activities before the disaster, during the disaster, and after the disaster. So before the disaster, for sure, we can do a lot like socialization and then trainings and reminding and give information. And during the disaster, for sure, we need to stay calm. And the last, after the disaster, I know this is also one of the most difficult part, because after the disaster, we need to rebuild the life, rebuild the society. So, yeah, we do believe that today's sessions on International Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction for Disability Inclusion is a very fruitful discussion, and we do believe that it's very important to strengthen the accessibility. So I think that's all that I can add for today. And before I give it back to our MC, I see that both our MCs already ready there. I just got some information from the committee that our MC will close this, because I don't want to close it. I don't want this session to end, actually, even it's already in the evening. Okay, so our MC will lead 2 activities here. The first is honoring an award the token of appreciation to our invited speakers. And the second, maybe our MC will lead a photo group session. So I myself, Ricky Setiawan, I would like to thank you first, Professor Kieran Shihi from UK. You come from a very long trip from UK to Indonesia. Thank you very much one more time for visiting Universitas Negeri Surabaya. And I also would like to thank Madam Salma Joffrey, who already come from Malaysia, and also to Bapak Eka Prastama, Ibu Serli Saragi, Ibu Diana Ramasari, and also I would like to thank 2 of our invited speakers who joined us online from UK and Netherlands, Professor Natalia Korsikova and Dr. Saskia van Mayen. Okay, so I would like to give this time back to the master of ceremony. Once more, thank you very much and see you in the next occasion. Bye-bye.
Terima kasih kami sampaikan kepada Bapak Ricky Setiawan, SPD, SD, MED yang telah menjadi moderator dalam sesi ini. Hadirin yang berbahagia, Sesi selanjutnya adalah penyerahan cindramata untuk invited speakers yang akan diserahkan oleh Ketua Pelaksana International Conference Disaster Risk Reduction for Disabilities Inclusion.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next agenda is giving the token of appreciation for our today's honored keynote speakers. The token of appreciation are going to be given by the chairperson of International Conference Disaster Risk Reduction for Disability Inclusion 2022.
Kepada Profesor Dr. Budianto MPD, kami mohon kesediaannya untuk menyerahkan cindramata kepada para invited speaker.
For Professor Dr. Budianto MPD, you may take the stage to give the token of appreciation to the honorable invited speakers and keynote speakers.
Terima kasih. Kami sampaikan kepada Profesor Dr. Budianto MPD yang telah berkenan untuk memberikan cenderamata kepada para invited speakers. Hadirin yang berbahagia, tibalah kita di penghujung acara pada International Conference di hari ini. Kami selaku Master of Ceremony mengucapkan terima kasih atas kesediaan para peserta, para tamu undangan, para invited speakers atas partisipasinya dalam acara ini.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now leading to the end of the event. We, as the Master of Ceremony, would like to apologize if there is any flaws and inconvenience. Thank you very much for the participation and may this event give you a meaningful experiences.
Semoga acara ini dapat membawa kebermanfaatan dan menjadi inspirasi baru serta membuka wawasan baru untuk kita semua.
Hopefully, we can all be guided by all the things that we have learned and discussed throughout the conference and be able to change starting from ourselves and the others.
Terakhir, kami informasikan kepada seluruh peserta International Conference untuk pembagian sertifikat dapat diambil di sekretariat.
And lastly, we would like to inform to all of the participants, you can take the certificate at the end of the event on the secretariat.
Mohon maaf atas segala kesalahan. Selamat sore. See you again in the next International Conference. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.